Somebody once told me the world was gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kinda dumb with her finger and her thumb stuck in the shape of an L to her forehead. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is games leaving the collection for August of 2022. I don't know why I felt the need to say the date, it just happened. Games leaving the collection. This is a monthly video I do every single month. Well, let's try that again. This is a monthly video I do. That just seems right. This is a monthly video I do in which I talk about the games leaving my collection, talk about why, which ones, how, which ones made, which ones are not sticking around, basically. And then the regular reminder on this that I get in a lot of games. I review a lot of games, I cover a lot of games, I buy a lot of games, I get sent a lot of games from publishers. Do not take this to mean any of these games are bad. I will go over my thoughts and opinions and all that. And many games that leave every single month are games that I thoroughly enjoy. I just enjoy other games more. I just think that I will not voluntarily choose to pull these ones off the shelf for one reason or another. Many of them are great games. Some of them didn't like so much. Two of these I didn't even play, and I'm finally, well, we'll talk about them. We'll go ahead and go through these one at a time. And before we dive further, this is a small reminder that over on Patreon, yes, I have a Patreon, link down below, I give away some of these games every single month. I give away one to the general full Patreon, and then 3 others I give away specifically to higher Patreon tiers, which get free games every single month. Feel free to sign up there, and you'll be entered into, well, getting some of these games. And this month, all of these games are on the, all but one of these games are on the table. One of them I've already promised to somebody else, so we'll talk about those as we go through it. Starting off the bat, and let's go ahead starting off the bat actually with the one game that I promised somebody else so I don't forget to mention it and confuse you as we go through it, with It's a Wonderful Kingdom. It's a Wonderful Kingdom from Le But de Jeu and Lucky Duck Games, or Le But de Jeu and distributed by Lucky Duck Games. This is the Kickstarter version that I backed with high hopes and excited for this one and was not overly intrigued by it. I like It's a Wonderful Kingdom, I do. I find it an enjoyable experience, and I like It's a Wonderful World, and I find that an enjoyable experience, but I personally find that I like It's a Wonderful World significantly more than It's a Wonderful Kingdom. I like the theme of It's a Wonderful Kingdom better. I like that more medieval style, and I think the art approach to the game is amazing in this game, and specifically in that medieval genre. But as far as games go, I'd rather play It's a Wonderful World over It's a Wonderful Kingdom, and I'd rather play Seven Wonders over It's a Wonderful World. So this one's like 2 steps removed from the game I would actually pull out and play. I enjoy the process of building up your tableau as you go through 4 ages of drafting cards, not drafting like from a hand, but drafting from an open draft. And this is a 2-player version which introduces a few concepts. First of all, the idea of traps, that you're going to be placing cards into a I pick, you choose style of gameplay, but you can place some cards face down and some cards are bad, and so you're trying to trick your opponent to when and where are you bluffing, are you not bluffing, are you putting a bad card into their very obviously good pile, or are you putting a good card into their very obviously good pile, which could really hurt you if they then call your bluff and take it. It adds a degree of bluffing and a bunch of scenarios or modules that utilize that trap mechanic in different ways. Overall, for me, It's a Wonderful Kingdom is It's a Wonderful World, just without drafting that I like. Open drafting is fine, I just prefer hand drafting much more, even in a 2-player experience. And so It's a Wonderful Kingdom is a game that for me is a very premium, very deluxe experience that again, is 2 steps behind. I enjoy it. Really strongly do enjoy this. I just like other games more, which is why it's over here. This one is unfortunately, or fortunately depending how you look at it, promised to Devon Talks Tabletop, who very much enjoyed the game and was very excited to see that there was a deluxe version of it available, and so I'll go ahead and send that his way. The rest of the games are all available from that whole Patreon concept, and as well as that, I always usually throw a link down below in terms of if you're wondering what do I do with the games I'm not giving away. Well, usually they get sold or traded in some way, shape, or form. I do have a link down below to a video you can check out where I go through the process literally of listing, selling a game, and all that over on Board Game Exchange, but we'll talk about that. We won't talk about that more. You can watch the video if you want to see more of that. Diving to the next one, which is going to be the first of 2 games that I have not actually played, which is Fox and the Forest Duet. Now this is one where if anyone who's watching this video tells me, no Alex, you're making a huge mistake, you should play this game, it's amazing, I'll give it a shot. But I got the Fox and the Forest Duet, and I read the rules for it, and then something about reading the rules made me so completely uncompelled by this game, which is, it's rare for me. It's rare for me that I take a look at a game and I read the rules, and just reading the rules on its own is enough for me to not be interested. Maybe this is a great game, maybe, and I'm not looking for any responses that say it's a totally fine game, you should play it. If anyone thinks this game is great, and for context, my favorite trick-taking games currently are The Crew, The Ghost for Christmas, other trick-taking games I'm not recalling offhand, but The Ghost of Christmas from Board Game Tables and The Crew from I don't even know who makes the crew. Pegasusville, I think. Those are my two favorite trick-taking games, although I do have others that I do very much enjoy. And Fox and the Forest Duet, I read the rules for this cooperative two-player trick-taking game and just was not interested in playing it from reading the rules. I got this one fairly recently, a box of used games. I tried this one out, and not tried it out, got it because I'm trying trick-taking games and exploring them more, and just again, rules did not interest me, rules did not compel me, it just looked boring. Now, if that's wrong, if it's a great game and if I absolutely should give it a shot, not if it's a competent game, not if it's a decent game. If you think this is a really good game, especially considering the two trick-taking games that I really liked, then by all means let me know and I'll make the effort to play it. I already know the rules. I just don't know if I was... But I know I was not interested in it. And so it's rare that it happens for me. Usually it's games that I wasn't as interested in to begin with. This one was not a game I was particularly interested in. It's just I'm slowly trying more and more trick-taking games that I spent years ignoring because trick-taking as a mechanic was a mechanic that I actively did not enjoy. And only in like the last year or so have I started to be like, no, I want to try it. I've found that I am appreciating trick-taking a lot more. Most of them still don't stay, but I'm appreciating them a lot more, and this one, we'll see. I don't know. I'm only going to play it if enough people, like more than one person, is like, yes, it's a great game, you should try that one out. From there, we're going to have Modern Art, a recent game that I really solidly enjoy. Really solidly enjoy this one. Modern Art, this is the Command Games production. This is one where, from Knizia, and it's a solid game of trying to determine the value of paintings based on how other players pay into those paintings in different ways. I really like this one. The nature of the paintings that are sold will determine the market demand for those paintings, which incentivizes this little bit of a loop in which people are bidding on the thing that seems to be popular, which is very much exactly how real life operates. People pay for the things that seem to be popular, which then makes those things popular. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way that the craze and demand makes the thing actually worth what was paid for. That's exactly what happens in Modern Art. It works really well as a concept, and it has that degree of if you pay a little too much and it turns out other people don't really care about it, things can tank very quickly. It's the nature of what happens when you have a good that doesn't have an inherent value. The value is the popularity of the good and the same attached rarity of that good attached to the popularity. Works really well as an interesting concept as far as a gameplay that takes roughly an hour, plays well with 5 players. For me, ultimately, I think the reason I'm getting rid of this one is just looking at my shelf, I just don't see this one being pulled out. I will always happily play this. I've had a great time playing Modern Art. It's a really solid game that I think does a great job with what it's doing and is a fun, compelling experience along the way. My problem with it is that I think in most cases I'm either going to play a longer 5-player game like El Grande or any of the other 5-player games in my collection that don't see enough play as it is because we don't have 5 players as much as we used to, like pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, all of that. And then if I want something shorter, I'll probably play For Sale. For Sale, which is, while very different, does give an excellent kind of market economy bidding style game going on. Very different in implementation, very different. I think it's by Knizia too? No, it's not. No, it's not. Stefan Dor, maybe? Stefan Dor, that sounds right for Sale. I think I'm just going by recollection here. But I think For Sale is a game I'd probably choose if I'm looking for something on the filler side, and El Grande or many others are something I'd probably choose if I'm looking for something on the longer side. A 5-player game that takes roughly an hour is just a rare thing that I'm specifically looking for. And so to that end, I think Modern Art is going, even though I think it's absolutely fantastic. Next up from there, we have the second and last game on this list that I have not played, which is Escape Room the Game. And honestly, I want to play this, in theory, but I think the problem for this one is that I have so many unlocked games already. I have a whole bunch of unlocked games in my collection that I'm still very much behind on. I have exit games that I'm very much behind on. I have game after game after game in the genre of escape room games that I'm very much behind on. And this has been in my collection for, I want to say, 5 years now, maybe. Like, I've had this since I first played my first unlock, which dates back to before I even started logging plays, so I don't know how long this has been, but it's been a long time. That's what I do know. It's been a very long time that I've had this, and I never pull it out. I always pull the next unlock or the next other game in those genres, as opposed to this bigger box commitment. Is it fantastic? Could well be. Do the ratings on Board Game Geek seem to indicate that? No, they seem to indicate that it's okay, and so I kind of am sadly and reluctantly biting the bullet and acknowledging that I will not actually table this one over another comparable escape room experience. And so as much as I'm compelled by it, as much as I do want to play it, I think it's time for me to just acknowledge the things that aren't actually happening, even though I want them to happen. From there we have Honga. Honga from Haba Games. Honga is a how to even describe this one. Honga is a kid family-friendly game. The lack of yellow box means it is suited to a little bit older as far as the player count is going for, as far as the age count is going for. For those who don't know, the Haba yellow boxes are more younger ages, and the Haba non-yellow boxes are already drifting to a higher age range. That said, for my plays of Honga, I really think it should be in the yellow box category. This game is very simplistic, or at least to me and to our children, to my children, not our children. I mean, our children's true if my wife are here, but she's not here. To my children, fine, our children. To our children, Honga seem to be a little bit on the lighter side. You have these little circular cards you're playing down to different regions, and the combination of the patterns in each card illustrate the power of different regions. So it's kind of you have a little circular card that has different action symbols on it, and where you play it determines the strength of different actions and different combinations of the areas of the board that you can play cards to. But past that, the game actually seemed fairly simple. You're moving up some stairs, you're grabbing some wild animals, you're trying to be mindful of your positioning, you're using the resource gathering of gathering various fish or berries or whatever the resources are in the game, and it works well overall. We did enjoy it, we had fun with it, but we found it to be a little simplistic, and even the main principle of Honga, the tiger who's trying to steal your food, felt poorly executed in the sense that the economy of the game made it kind of a pointless action, which is fine. It is fine, but to me that kind of pushed Honga into the yellow box territory for me, and a yellow box territory that manages to be just complicated enough that I'd rather play, just complicated enough that depending on what my goal is, I'd either rather play a full yellow box territory game or play something a little bit more adult focused. Like Haba has an excellent line of games, the what's it called again? Almost an escape room style of games. The Key series of games, which I think is absolutely fantastic, and that I'd probably play with, like, if I'm looking for a slightly more intricate experience, versus I'd probably play the yellow box if I'm looking for something a little less strategic, but a little more accessible. Honga falls into a weird area where the rules are a drop more complicated, but the strategy itself is not, which is probably good in terms of adjusting children into more complex rules without the layering of strategy, but ultimately for me means I end up picking other games instead. Solid game. There are other Haba games, including Miyabi. Miyabi's a great one. Miyabi you should really play. I think I got rid of Miyabi. Like, I'm saying it's a great one, even as I say I got rid of it. Miyabi's a great game that I think that I would rather play Miyabi over Honga any single day. Both of them are still losing to the vast amounts of kid-friendly games that we have, and that ultimately I pick based on what my kids are most likely to play. In any case, moving on to the next one, which is Mini Express. Mini Express, a stock train game, basically. Not trick-taking. There's no trick-taking going on here. A stock train game that is meant to be very accessible, plays in around an hour or less, honestly, as you go through the process of building out a map and trying to be mindful of the two actions you can take. The only two actions. You either lay trains or take a stock, take a share, and the balance of those two options and when you take them and how you take them defines how well the game operates. Mini Express is great. I really enjoy this one. I think it is solid as far as giving you an accessible degree of stock train game, whatnot, while giving you so many, it just gives you two actions. Is all it is, and then from there the complexity develops and iterates based on how you play it. My main problem with it is I think I primarily enjoy it at two players. Two players felt like a really head-to-head game, and I think for the most part, higher player counts, there's a degree of almost victim to the decisions other players are making where you don't feel anymore that you're winning because of you. You feel like you're losing because of the actions of others. Two players gives you such a head-to-head feel that it's either you or your opponent, and that is the nature of it. So at two players was my preferred player count, but also at two players, I just don't think I'm going to table this one quite as much. I think this genre of game is a solid game. It's a solid game and a solid genre. For me, I like it, I enjoy it, need to play other games instead, or I will pick other games instead. From there, speaking of two-player games I'm not going to pick, we have War Chest with all expansions inside. I shouldn't say all expansions. Are there more than two expansions? With two expansions inside. This is the two first expansions. What are they called again? We have the Nobility and the Siege expansion mixed in here. And War Chest is a really solid game from AEG that I really, really, really enjoy and also don't pick out as much. So this is a kind of a deck building or a bag building game of tactical combat, tactical strategy, I should say, as you try to figure out. You start the game by drafting your units from a pool of different units, and then you pick those units, and you have 4 units that are your units with your own special unique actions as you navigate a grid over here. We have the back over here. As you navigate the tactical grid in terms of this being mindful of area control as you try to take control of key areas. Each unit has their own tactic, and as you draw tokens from a bag, you're drawing 3 chips from a bag every single round, and those 3 chips define what you do and how you do them. Are you recruiting? Are you adding more units to your bag? Are you placing? Are you moving? Are you bolstering? What are you doing on the board with those units? And how you build your bag and how you take your actions defines who will win the game and how. It is a really solid tactical abstract game with a ton of variety baked in that for me, I think the fact that there were fewer chips than I would like kind of forces your decisions a bit more than I would like, while also a game that does have a little bit of extra a little bit more luck than I would like in a game that is this tactical otherwise. I think it's a great concept. This concept that David Thompson, that Trevor Benjamin have put together, and they've applied to multiple games, works really, really well, but also in a game as cut and dry as War Chest, I felt there was a drop too much luck on top of an otherwise amazing system. I think it's great, it's done very well, but again, we'll pick other games instead. From there we have Mortum Medieval Detective, a game that was totally okay for me in these, speaking of unlocked games, speaking of these games which you have a bit of a mystery going on, there's different kind of games out there. There's two, I don't know if I shouldn't say two, there's probably more than that, but I find there's the escape room style game, like Unlocks, the Exits, and a bunch of others in that genre. Then you also have the more detective style games where you're trying to figure out a case. You have a bunch of information presented to you, and then in some way, shape, or form, you're gathering more information, and eventually you get it presented with a list of questions, and you have to answer those questions as well as possible, and that is Mortum Medieval Detective. I generally like those games, but I like the escape room games a lot more. I would say from the more solving and mystery games, my favorite one so far has been a game called Suspects from Hachette Games, and I like Suspects a lot, but most other games in this genre, I have found the nature of the discovery information and the timer aspect of the game, because there has to be a timer, otherwise, when do you want, you just keep going, so there has to be some form of a timer, some sort of a reason to stop asking questions at one point or another. I have found that I often feel a drop unfulfilled. I feel like I have found some information and not found other pieces of information, and I always find myself wanting a bit more. I like more the nature of an unlock game where you have a straight up timer and you're trying to deduce things as opposed to find things. For me, something about the nature of trying to solve a puzzle versus trying to retain 14 conversations in my head, they both stimulate the brain in different ways, and my mind tries to drift more towards the puzzle solving as opposed to the, hey, 14 conversations happened here, and that person mentioned something about the fact that there was someone at the stable and they saw someone wandering around the back, and that person mentioned how there was no one around the back and now there's conflicting. Again, great puzzles, but for me, I prefer the unlock style. In the case of Mortum Medieval Detective, one of the things they do as a spin is they have the aspect of kind of almost like a role-playing experience where you have different characters with different stats on them, but I found that concept was more abstract than I would like. In theory, the concept added a lot of depth to the experience, but in execution, I felt that it was more shallowy, doesn't sound like a word. The way they applied the D&D style character building to the game felt more shallow and more surface level as opposed to really digging deeply down into the fabric of the experience. I think there was potential for it to really stand out in terms of how it did it, and instead it was just another decent mystery game. Not bad, not by a long shot, but in a genre where I don't really love these quite as much. I like them and I'm intrigued by them, and I prefer unlock style games. From there we have Ausonia. Ausonia, which is a game that I totally thought would stick around for a lot longer, but for some reason does not get played as much as I would like. I like Ausonia. I like it a lot. This is a game that I got from the original Kickstarter, really enjoyed it, dove into it. It's a deck building game in which you're trying to get to 60 influence, I believe it's called. 60 influence before other players do, and you're trying to play these cards, and did I review this anywhere? I don't even know if I reviewed this. Maybe I did a short video on Quack & Co. I don't know. Either way, but Ausonia is a game that is a deck building game where you're trying to get to 60 influence, and you're trying to be mindful of the deck you build and how you mix together different factions and utilize those towards your engine. It works really well, and one of my favorite concepts is the way you weed your deck. You weed your deck by building these cores, by basically mounting these cores to the board, so you have these gems available every single turn. So you're both weeding and powering up at the same time, which I really enjoy. I love weeding my deck in deck building games, and Ausonia, that's no different. For me, I thought I liked it a lot. And I do like it a lot, but for some reason it doesn't get pulled off the shelf. There are other deck building games I'd rather play. I'd still rather play Dominion. I'd still rather play the Quest for El Dorado. And even a game like Star Realms, I think I'd still rather play that, the more head-to-head nature of taking down your opponent, as opposed to the corruption influence concept in Ausonia. And then I don't love the way you mix together expansions in this game. This is a problem for me in many deck building games. The way you mix together expansions in this game is you have to find the right sets of cards and mix them together, and I find myself always choosing to just not play it instead of going through those hoops. I am a bit picky about my deck building games, and Ausonia I think is great. I really do. It's up there amongst my better deck building games, but in a genre in which I have too many as it is, and so I'm picking the best of the best for me as opposed to the very, very good ones. Ausonia lasted quite a bit, maybe a year and a half, something like that, which for some of you is like quite a bit. For me, that could be a long time. Ausonia, I really enjoyed it for a while and played it a lot and played through the expansions, but then at a certain point I find myself just being drawn back to Dominion and back to Quest for El Dorado and back to the other deck building games that I like so much more. From there, we have Cape May, and these next four are all recent ones to the point that one or two of these you may not have even seen the reviews for, which is a bad timing conversation on my end. The last two, depending on when this video goes up, the last two you may not have seen reviews for, so spoilers, I guess. Cape May. Cape May is one in which from Thunderworks Games, and this is one where I was totally okay with it, but I was not in love with it, not by a long shot. I found Cape May with its very accessible, almost Monopoly adjacent style gameplay. This is a game in which in Cape May, you're building out Cape May, and you're moving around the board, taking actions around the board to try to build up both your economy and your presence, your residential areas. You're focusing on both the economy of the game so you can pay for things, and the points so you can actually win the game. And I find a big part of the game is about the timing of when to switch from one to the other. In the beginning of the game, you almost always want to focus on economy first. There's almost no reason not to, because focusing on residential then economy would be the worst way to play the game. And so you primarily want to focus on getting some economy in place so you can get the income coming in throughout the rounds. But then at a certain point you want to pivot to residential so you can maximize how you spend your money as efficiently as possible to build up the best neighborhoods and to get as much presence in the best neighborhoods. And I find that's pretty much the game. The game is all about when to pivot to that point. Most of the other aspects of the game just aren't compelling enough. Where to build is not compelling enough. What to build past that decision is not compelling enough. Everything else, the action cards are interesting but not compelling enough. Everything else in the game is a totally fine experience with a key decision point as far as when you pivot from one style to the other, and that will basically determine who wins the game, at least in my opinion. I think Cape May is totally fine. I'm fine with it. I enjoy it. But I certainly don't love it, and certainly would not ask to play it. I would play it almost reluctantly compared to the other games that I have access to instead. From there we have Mystic Vale. Mystic Vale Essential Edition, another AEG title. And how many AEG titles do we have today? I think we have 3 AEG titles today. We have War Chest, we have Mystic Vale, and we have one more after Mystic Vale. Mystic Vale Essential Edition from AEG. This is a solid one. I enjoyed Mystic Vale. I did. I thought it was a good deck building game. Not deck building. It's a card crafting experience from John D. Clare. It's a card crafting experience in which you're going to be crafting out your cards in this slight, almost push your luck engine as you figure out how, not almost, it's definitely push your luck engine as far as how you craft your cards in terms of building the right cards so that you don't spoil effectively. You're going to be trying to pull cards from your deck, and if you have too many of a certain symbol, then you effectively bust and you lose your actions that round. So it's a constant decision as far as how far can you push it, how efficient can you make your actions, versus at what point are you just going to bust and have a less efficient turn. And then balancing that around the economy of the game, around the markets in which you can buy cards, because again, it's card crafting. You're overlaying these plastic cards over one another to build out a card in a particular combination of symbols and activations that ideally work for you to give you the best card deck in the game. And so that means you're going to be cycling through your deck a lot faster than a typical deck builder, because you're not making your deck larger, you're just making your deck better as you go through it. I like the system a lot. And I liked it in Mystic Vale, but I also found Mystic Vale to be almost unfulfilling compared to Dead Reckoning from AEG, which I found does the same card crafting system, but the game around it is significantly more improved. I think Mystic Vale would be a game that I'd be far more intrigued by if I hadn't played Dead Reckoning, because the card crafting itself is a lot of fun. The card crafting has a degree of something to it that you don't get from deck building games, and I enjoy that system. I've just seen it done in a far more robust engine, and I think that I mean, it makes sense. Dead Reckoning came out years after Mystic Vale. Mystic Vale was one of the starts of John D. Clare's card crafting system, and I can't wait to see card crafting applied to other games in other ways. I think it is a great, compelling system, and one that can be a lot of fun. I just like Dead Reckoning more, and so Mystic Vale unfortunately does not make the cut. From there we have Mariposas. Mariposas, another AEG game. This one that was totally fine, but also semi-forgettable. I think Mariposas is a great gateway game. In Mariposas, what you're doing is effectively migrating a bunch of butterflies around the board. You're not going to a specific destination. You're ambiently fluttering from one location to another in different ways, so you can try to score points in the 3 tiers of the various seasonal goals you have, plus a few other factors trying to be mindful, such as hatching butterflies, collecting tokens, other things that will give you points in the game. And I think Mariposas is totally fine. I think it's totally enjoyable. I think it's totally ambient, and ambient is the key word I would apply to the game. It almost feels a little aimless. It almost feels like the system is designed to just give you stuff you can do, and it doesn't feel like quite as directional, which is both a pro and a con. But for me, I think eventually, because of the nature of the rest of the game, puts it a bit more on the con side of things. It's one in which I don't have the greater sense of purpose I have when playing other games. I feel like every round I play some cards, I move some butterflies, I do some stuff, and I never have that sense of, well, that was a really cool turn, or that was an amazing thing I did, or this was compelling, this was 3 turns thought out. It's quick, it's fun, it's to the point, it's a great gateway game, but I just think I have other gateway games I personally would pick that are sticking around in my collection, as opposed to this one, which is totally fine, and I'm happy I played it, and I'm ready to move on from it. And that brings us to the last game over here, which is going to be Block and Key. Block and Key, which is a not really a polyomino game. It has polyomino tiles to a degree, but it's more of a pattern matching game in a sense, in which you have these patterns on this board, but you're going to see the patterns from a specific two-dimensional angle. Every player is going to have, you have this big structure in the middle of the table, and every player gets to see things from specific sides of the board. Each player has their own viewpoint, and each viewpoint provides a different puzzle as far as what they're seeing because of the nature of the polyominoes and how they fit on a three-dimensional grid, but how you're looking at it from a two-dimensional angle. And it's a cool concept in theory, but it's a cool concept that, to me, didn't actually have any gameplay value. The gameplay of Block and Key is place a block and try to score a card, and there's very little decision making there's very little decision making in the game that I felt was compelling. For the most part, the obvious choice is the obvious choice, and it comes down to the luck of both the cards you drew and how easily they fit into the blocks you have, and then how your opponents do or don't mess you up and or help you in the process of them placing the blocks. I felt that the actual decisions I made on Block Key were so minimal as to make this a game that felt like it was purely focused on the aesthetic nature of the game, of having that little thing that you build up, which is very cool, but at the cost of any real gameplay. To me, Block and Key is a cool concept, and one that I never feel the need to play again, and would rather play many other pattern matching games over this one, just because it's not compelling enough in the actual decision making. Is it a cool little table piece? Absolutely it is. Is it a good gateway game for those looking for something very accessible and a little charming? Potentially, yes. For me, I just want more decisions in my game, and Block and Key did not give me more decisions in my game. And that's it. These are the 13, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 games I'm getting rid of in August. A bunch of decent games, some that I regret more than others. Ausonia is a tough one. I'm just not playing it enough. Modern Art's a tough one. That's a tough one, I guess. I think really two harder decisions for me, and the rest are games that I enjoyed to various degrees, mostly games that I enjoyed to various degrees, or two games I didn't play, but just games I'm going to pick other games over. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.